So hello and welcome to the video. Lockdown continues, but a gentle easing has begun, so optimism is building. Flight schedules are being filled in for the latter part of May, and some airport terminals are starting to turn their lights back on. Or at least they're checking the terminal plans to just remind themselves where the light switches are. So last week's video looked at 6 things that you can do now to prepare yourself for when we can travel again. This week's video will look at 6 websites that you really need to know about when it comes to travelling, particularly when it comes to flying. Although I won't look at 6 websites, I'll actually look at 24. But as lists of 6 are sort of my thing, I'll group those 24 websites under 6 headings. So for 6 or 24 websites that you should know about, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt. Over the last 25 years, I've travelled a lot. I've lived in 5 countries on 4 continents. I've flown over 1.3 million miles. I've visited over 100 countries, every American state, but I'm nowhere near done. So subscribe, and perhaps you'll pick up some hacks, hints and tips to make your next trip better. So the 6 stages of travel that I want to look at are finding, planning, booking, preparing, tracking, and remembering. So first of all, finding, although finding and inspiring is probably a better heading. Inspiration can strike at any time in any way, and everyone's idea of a good trip is different, so I can't really tell you how to inspire yourself. I will though mention the Lonely Planet website, which every year publishes a list of hot travel destinations which can be quite inspiring. It was a little different in 2021, but 2020's suggestions of Bhutan and North Macedonia are still valid. If you're anything like me, and if you're watching this video you probably are, then the inspiration for a trip can often come from the flights that you take to get there. If so, the first place I'd go is Google Flights. I talked about that in some detail in my series on tier point runs, but let me just give you a quick recap. Select an originating city, click on the map, and it will show you all prices to every possible destination. It's brilliant. The default dates will find the cheapest 1-week option in the next 6 months, which might not be that helpful, so there are options to pick specific dates or to find the cheapest option within certain constraints. I looked at the week after the ban on international leisure travel is lifted here, and there were a very pleasant range of options. Clicking on a city shows the specific flights available. Further filtering options are available, including direct flights only and specific airline alliances, although you can't yet filter by a specific airline. Seville with BA wouldn't be available on those dates, but Lisbon would. You can then select specific flights and it will show booking options which drill through to the selling party, allowing you to book. It's brilliant, and that's a really tempting fare. There are a few limitations. Not every airline is included. So looking at San Diego to Las Vegas on the same dates, the cheapest fare is £47 on Frontier, which is about $65 US. Google will show you that there are options on Southwest Airlines, but won't show you the price. Southwest has always done things a little differently, so I can sort of understand that. And if you find those flights on Southwest's site, you'll see that their prices are actually considerably higher, so perhaps it's a good thing they don't show up on Google Flights. Certain other airlines also don't show up, and it is quite hard to explain why. Notable omissions include Thai Airways and Air China, and there are reports that some other airlines only show a subset of their available flights through Google Flights, which is doubly odd as they all show up on ITA Matrix, which is the underlying system that feeds Google Flights. But I'm getting ahead of myself as we're still in the inspiration phase of all of this, so before we move on, one last tip for Google Flights. If you slide the blue bar to the price you're willing to pay for a trip, a blue dot will show in every destination you can reach for that fare. So in October, £500 will get you to Singapore on BA as well, although it doesn't look like you'd get much further. One last site for finding travel that is inspired by a bargain price is Secret Flying. This is a site that collates good value fares from around the world in one place. It's a global site, but you can register for alerts with specific criteria set to narrow the results a bit. This is also a good place to look for error fares. Very occasionally, airlines will misload fares into the reservation systems, which will produce short-lived bargains. That's a topic unto itself, but I have seen some exceptionally cheap fares show up through secret flying. So, from inspiration to planning. This means turning an idea you have into a specific itinerary. This may be a simple step if you're looking for just a return flight somewhere, but if you're looking for something more complicated like an open jaw itinerary, multiple stops, or something a little bit complicated with the goal of perhaps maximising tier points, then Google Flights won't do. You'll need to go to the feeder system of Google Flights, which is Matrix ITA, which again is brilliant. A little trickier to just pick up and use, but with some practice you'll be able to do pretty much anything a travel agent can do, short of actually booking the flight itself. I did a deeper dive into this system in my tier point run videos, so I won't repeat that here, and I am planning a more detailed guide to Matrix for the future. Although I will say it'll show you fares, flights, and the fares components if you drill through. Another uber technical site for flight planning is Expert Flyer. I've allowed my subscription to lapse as I'm not travelling at all at the moment, but for £10 a month you'll get access to some very detailed information about flights and fares, as well as helpful things like load factors, which might steer you towards one flight over another. Expert Flyer also shows seat maps, and the free version will allow you to set alerts if you're after a specific seat in a specific class on a specific flight. While we're still talking about planning, there are two sites I use if you're looking to book a reward seat. Reward Flight Finder allows you to enter a routing and see what reward seats are available. It'll show availability across all classes plus the points cost. Seat Spy is similar. Both are only as good as the data feed from the airlines, so there can be some inaccuracies, but they are helpful much more often than they're not. And finally, on planning, airlines sell tickets in different jurisdictions through different points of sale systems. So you can find cheaper fares by spoofing the internet into thinking you're somewhere you're not. I have an affiliate link to Surfshark, which is a VPN system that does this. The link is in the description below. As an example, if you lived in Singapore and you bought a ticket on Emirates from there to Sydney, you would pay £463. If you told the internet that you were actually in the UK and you bought the exact same ticket, you'd only pay £439, which is a £24 or a 5% saving. That's not going to change your life, but the saving would fund a couple of months subscription to Surfshark. So, time to do the like, comment and subscribe thing. So, like, comment and subscribe. Thanks in anticipation. Right, on to booking. If you've got to this stage via ITA Matrix, possibly the best option is Book with Matrix. This takes an itinerary from Matrix and clubs it into online booking engines. Copy the itinerary into the Book with Matrix box and you'll get the booking options. Generally it will show US based booking engines, but it can be very handy for a complicated itinerary. With simpler flight itineraries there are obviously plenty of options. Kayak possibly belongs in the planning section, as it is quite handy for exploring simpler flight options, but I use it regularly as it is really handy for showing the cheapest booking option once you have a specific routing in mind. But having said that, if I'm booking a relatively simple option, these days I generally book directly with the airline. These days airlines match, or in some cases beat, the prices offered by online booking engines. Doing so foregoes any rewards you might get from a third-party reward system, but I do that quite deliberately with an eye on avoiding disaster. If something goes wrong, it is much easier to deal with the airline directly rather than a third-party booking engine, particularly when it comes to refunds. Control of all bookings transfers to the airline 24 hours before departure, so if something goes wrong on your day of travel, you will always deal directly with the airline regardless of how you booked. But the loss of a relatively modest reward is a price I'm willing to pay for greater control over things if they go wrong. So this video's list of travel websites needs to actually include every single airline's website, but I'll spare you that because they're all fairly easy to find. If I'm booking a simple package involving flights, hotels and/or cars, I might still though use Expedia. You can often get a better deal with them by combining different elements in one booking. Saving money is always a good reason to do something in my book. As the risk of disaster is relatively low with those sorts of trips, the savings you make and the rewards you earn offset any risk. I've had a good experience too with Expedia's customer service on the few occasions I've needed to use it. If I fly BA, I also look at BA Holidays as a way of making that booking, as there can be savings there plus other benefits. I'm planning a separate video to talk about this though, as it is a decent topic in its own right. I'm also planning a separate video in which I'll talk about how I find and book hotels. So back to flights and onto the preparing category. Once you've booked a flight, thoughts will generally turn to seats. Seat Guru is probably the best known site showing seating plans, and it is handy. I remember years ago there were far more comments about specific seats, but it is still helpful in understanding what's ahead of you. Be cautious though, as there can be lots of similar planes with slightly different configurations, and the plane you book onto is often not the one you actually end up flying on, so keep an eye out for equipment changes after you make your booking. Another good seating resource for BA flights is the BA Source. This has lots and lots of geeky stuff about planes themselves, but there are also great seat maps which are highly accurate. There's also very good guidance on how to determine which plane you're actually going to be on. So on to tracking, and there are a couple of interesting sites to talk about here. Check My Trip is an app which, after registering, you can email your itineraries to and it will show up in the app. It will monitor airline schedule changes and is often the first place to tell me about a change, often before the airline does itself. On the day of travel, it will alert you to gates and gate changes, often before the airport does. Overall, it's a really handy app for when you're actually travelling. Also under the tracking banner is Flight Radar 24. This is a website and an app, and it can be really helpful in working out where your plane actually is. If your plane home hasn't actually left London yet, you're going to be looking at a delay, and airports will often not tell you about delays as they want you through security in the departure lounge spending money. I also quite enjoy sitting in the lounge working out where a plane I can see taxiing in front of me is actually heading. One final mind-bending function of the Flight Radar app for older people like me who haven't been surgically attached to technology since birth is the ability to point the app at the sky and work out where the planes you can see are going. It's a form of magic, if you ask me. And finally, remembering. If you're keen to track the history of the flights you've taken, there are a couple of sites that will do that for you and present you back some interesting graphics and insights. I use OpenFlights, which is probably not the flashiest option out there, but I like it and I quite like the visualizations. Indeed, I use this image as the background to my video's thumbnails, and I was able to extract the flights from here and integrate them into Google Maps to produce this, which I use in my intro. Not sure I'd be able to repeat it, but I quite like it and it is quite cool. Other options for this are my Flight Radar 24 and BA97, demonstrated here by the travel history of Paul Lucas. Finally, photos are all digital these days, and online storage options are abundant and very inexpensive. I have buckets of storage available to me through subscriptions I already have to Microsoft, Norton and Google products, and there are plenty of others. So backing up your photos online is simple, may actually cost you nothing, and is a great way of avoiding the agony of having your photos wiped from your phone or your laptop if either of them get too close to a giant electromagnet. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you saw at least a handful of websites that are of interest to you that you'll go ahead and check out. Please like this video if you did, subscribe if you're new, and leave me a comment. It is always great to hear what people think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Goodbye.